Hello and welcome back to True Faith, the Writer's Block, where we discuss matters in the wider football world with links back to Newcastle United. Tonight for episode 3, I'm your host, I'm Daniel Wales, once again, as we saw in episode 1. Remember, if you do want to do things like this for True Faith, to contribute and be a part of it, head to @TFNUFC on Twitter and get in touch. As in episode 1, I'm joined by Lee Forster. Lee, how are you?
I'm all right, apart from Newcastle United ruining the weekend on a consistent
Every
basis.
weekend it always happens.
Should be used to it by now.
I'm also joined by two new faces in the shape of Chris Curry and Craig Shaw. If you could both introduce yourselves just with a little bit of a memory, perhaps, that would be absolutely fantastic. So, Chris, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. It's great to be here. Great to be part of the Writer's Block. I've been a Newcastle fan for as long as I can remember supporting. Well, liking football. Keegan sucking me in. The love affair began then. So I remember when we were good. I'm still here when we're not good. And in terms of writing for True Faith, I started writing in the first lockdown. I believe my first article was about Joe Litton, and nothing's changed since then. So I'm still here now and enjoying it.
Thank you very much, Craig.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. So yes, I mean, similar to Chris, really, being a Newcastle fan for as long as I can remember. My mum's side of the family originally out of Biker, so got those family ties there. But I'm from County Durham originally. I think an early memory for me really is being fortunate enough to be in the stadium when Alan Shearer scored that absolute screamer against Chelsea. I remember it just being a sort of blazing hot day towards the end of the season. Was right in line with when he turned Marcel Desailly and just spanked it top corner. So doesn't get much better than that, to be fair. And happy memories. But yeah, glad to be here, lads.
Thank you very much to you both. Tonight's first topic is the very worrying prospect of Fulham potentially catching Newcastle come the end of the season. And that would mean Newcastle, of course, would be relegated. Fulham would stay in the Premier League at the expense of Newcastle. So coming to you firstly, do you think Fulham will catch Newcastle and stay up?
I wrote in the True Faith Weekly Diary after the Manchester United game on Sunday night. I asked the question, whose shoes would you rather be in? And I think the long and the short of it is that I'd rather be in Fulham's shoes at the minute. They've got the momentum. They've got a manager who just oozes confidence. And having had a look at the fixtures in between now and the end of the season, I'm not happy to report that I've got both Newcastle and Fulham going into that final day of the season, both on 32 points. Fulham picking up 10 points in between now and the season, and ourselves picking up 7. So the long and the short of it, yes, I do think they will catch us. And based on what I'm looking at here, I expect us to go into that final game of the season on 32 points each. A big point on that, though, is with the announcement from Boris yesterday, if Fulham potentially have 5,000 fans at Craven Cottage on the last day of the season, does that create a fairly uneven playing field? You've played 37 games behind closed doors, and all of a sudden, on what could be a huge winner-takes-all game, Fulham have got 5,000 fans behind them, albeit that Fulham fans are notoriously quiet. So yes, I think we'll go into the final game of the season on 32 points.
Out of interest, Lee, where do you see us picking up those 7 points you mentioned?
Interestingly, I've not got some of these points we are picking up are optimistic draws. I don't have us picking up another win in between now and the Fulham game. I've got us picking up 7 draws at best.
Wow.
I have. We're losing against Tottenham at home.
Yeah.
We're losing away to Liverpool, Arsenal, Leicester, and Man City. And in the other games, I've got us down for picking up a point.
Very interesting. Chris, are you as optimistic as Lee?
Not at all. Very similar to Lee. On the subject of fans, I think Scott Parker would probably rather there was 5,000 Newcastle fans in there, because it's on Steve Bruce would probably put it more in his favour. I second what Lee's saying. I look at Fulham, and you've got to give credit to Scott Parker, your young manager. He's went back to the training ground, something that our manager seems to be incapable of doing. He's looked at the problems, he's addressed them. They're tighter defensively. They've had some great additions to the squad. I think Maja up front has added them an extra dynamic that they haven't had before. I watched them against Everton. I thought they were brilliant. The way they passed the ball, the movement, Lookman on the ball. I looked at them and I thought if we play them next week, we get beat about 5-0 because they're a far better footballing team than us. I think the momentum's with them. I think our confidence isn't there. I think the minute we don't go a goal in front, the plan goes out the window. The head goes down, the shoulders shrug. Shelby just does what Shelby does. And, I just can't see us really getting out of this situation once we're in it.
Craig, as Lee mentioned before, if that does come down to the last game of the season, how do you see that potentially going?
Oh, it's a great question. I mean, even just the question fills me with a bit of dread, to be honest. The thought of going into that game, say, needing to win. I mean, if we think about how Lee's sort of put it together, where we're going on level points, and obviously the way the goal difference is at the moment, Fulham might only need a draw, and the way we've been playing, you would not back us to go away there and get a win if we needed it. We really need to go in at least 1 point ahead of them, so we have the option of a draw. I really do believe that. I think these next 4 games are absolutely crucial for us. I mean, you think about Wolves, West Brom, Villa, Brighton. I think we need at least 7 points out of 12. Wolves, have had a bit of a revival a few weeks ago. That was probably an attractive fixture for us. West Brom away, they've not been winning games, but they've been in games. They've been drawn. Some creditable performances, and then obviously, we all know the sort of mini rivalry we have with Villa. There's no love lost there, and then we go away to Brighton as well. We've not got a great recent record at Brighton. It's been a bit of a sticky stadium for us, particularly since we got back in the top flight. So, yeah, I'm very nervous, lads. I've got to say, I think the only sort of sliver of hope I have is, I suppose, 2 things really. Is one, have Fulham got this momentum a little bit too early? And that's not based on anything rather than a hunch. Is that you normally see a team come with that sort of late rally, great escape. Now, because of the sort of compressed nature of the season, Fulham have done this in February, but there's still 13 games to go. So I do just wonder, will they, hit a run of 4 or 5 games where they don't pick up any points? Could that derail them? And the only other thing is obviously Callum Wilson. We desperately need him back. If we can get him back fit for enough games in which we have a relatively good chance of picking up points, he could just be the difference. But there's no doubt between now and him coming back, we need to get at least 2 wins, if not 3, on the board.
Yeah,
it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Fulham in their next 5 games might only pick up 1 or 2 points. Mm-hmm. They've got Palace away coming up this weekend, followed by Tottenham, Liverpool, and Man City on the bounce. Let's be honest, if they were to pick up anything from those, it's going to be a bonus. And then they're followed by Leeds. So in those 5 games, you could see Fulham picking up potentially a couple of draws, might sneak 1 win. They've got a bit of confidence behind them at the moment, Fulham have. You have, what you might see is the next 5 games might sort of drain some of that confidence.
I think you're right, mate. I mean, I don't think any team down there, as Craig makes a great point, there's no team down there that has a striker as good as Callum Wilson. We are definitely head and shoulders above the other sides in there. I watched Brighton the other night, play great stuff and move through the line so well. They're lacking a striker. If you put Callum Wilson in a Leeds team or a Brighton team, they're probably top 7, top 8. He probably regrets coming here, in all fairness to the poor lad. But he's a great striker, not just for what he does in terms of the goals, the movement, the way he brings other players in. And I think if you get him back as soon as possible, we might just have a chance. But what fills me full of nightmares is the last game, as you say, Lee, 0-0. They get a penalty and Mitrovic steps up. That fills me full of dread.
Oh, God. That's a doomsday scenario.
Oh, mate. At least we might fluff it and headbutt the ref possibly and get a red card.
Or even worse still, Josh Madger.
Oh, that would be good.
Can you imagine
that
them?
to me is the nightmare scenario. Ex-Mackham potentially condemning us to go down would be way worse than Mitrovic.
Like a statue in the bridges, wouldn't there? You can imagine.
Yeah. Oh, you never hear the end of it.
I think that Mitrovic, you'd think he might take some pity on us, especially considering he has missed a few penalties in his time. Of course, he missed against Scotland, was it, in the European Championship playoffs?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. He doesn't always seem to score his penalties. It would be a bit like when Yohan Cabaye, who we'll come on to soon, when he took that penalty against Carl Darlow when we did ultimately go down in 2016. But of course, that was saved by Darlow, and we all thought at that point we might stay up, but of course we didn't. You mentioned there the Wolves, West Brom, Villa, Brighton games coming. Do you see wins? Any of you? Do you see wins coming from any of those games? I know, Lee, obviously you don't, but Chris, Craig, do you see any wins coming from those games?
I think, to be fair, with Wolves, I do think Wolves have picked up a little bit, but they can be got at. And I think, lacking Jimenez is a huge thing for them. And I think that's probably derailed their season, similar to us with Wilson, isn't it? We could get something there, but at best, I would see a draw. I mean, we always do well against West Ham at home, don't we? And then Brighton, like I said before, they can't finish the dinner, can they? So you've got to hope that we can do something. I would fancy West Brom to do us, because I think Allardyce would get them really whipped up for that. That's the worry there.
Yeah, I mean, just following on from Chris, I mean, that Wolves game, I just think we have to win it. I don't even think a draw is good enough at this stage. I mean, where does Bruce go if we don't win that game? It's been the hot topic for what seems like months and months, but I think it's really coming to the end game now. How much longer do you give him in order to turn this around and try and put together a string of results? And everybody was saying, do you say 2 wins in 4? Do you say 2 wins in 16? It doesn't matter how you cut. You need to do it back to back. You can't go win-loss. You need to gather some momentum. And to be fair to Fulham, that's what they've done. They've put together 2 wins, 2 draws in the last 4, and all of a sudden people are talking about them like they're flying. If you look at the results over the last 16 games, Fulham, they've actually only won 3 games. Now, if you said that, you think, well, Park will be under a hell of a lot of pressure. But what he has done is he's made sure they're not losing games. They've only lost 4 in that time. Okay, 9 draws. You'd rather have a couple of wins thrown in there, but they're in every game. And I think Chris said it like when we kicked off the discussion. If we go behind in a game, I have next to no confidence we'll come back and get anything from it. I think Norman put a great stat in the podcast at the weekend. I think of the games where we've went behind under Bruce, there's been a potential 96 points on offer, and we've actually only taken 13. So that just tells its own story for me.
Any other club would have got rid of him. When you look at likes of Wilder and Parker, they've got credit in the bank with their clubs and their fans. Bruce has 0 credit with us. Arguably had no credit from the minute he took the job, but he's got no credit in the bank at all, which is why, we haven't given the time, but it's obviously we don't pay the guy's paycheck.
If I had to ask all 3 of you for a prediction as to whether we will or won't stay up at this point right now, with, of course, the situation that we're currently in, I'll start with Lee, then I'll go to Craig and Chris. Do you think we will stay up? So Lee, starting with...
I've got no reason for believing this, but my gut tells me yes, somehow.
Craig?
Do you know what? I'm absolutely the same. Like, my gut for some reason saying we'll scrape through and we'll be stuck with another year of Bruce, even though my head is telling me we're a goner. But yeah, I don't know how we will, but we will somehow stay up, I think.
And finally, Chris?
I'm going to be the thrown cabbage in the mix here. I can't see it. I've got deja vu feelings from time gone by. I wrote a piece recently when I called it the long and winding road to relegation, and I recognise all the stops. Winless way, hopeless place, you name it. All these games just strike a chord from seasons gone by. We stuck with McLaren too long. We're sticking with this guy too long. I think we're gone.
Well, that's a bit pessimistic on which to end that little.
The other way around.
I know. Yeah. Thank you to Lee and Craig for being a little bit optimistic. Moving on, lads, to the retirement of Yohan Cabaye recently. Newcastle's former number 4 spent 2.5 years on Tyneside, making 76 appearances and scoring 18 goals before leaving, of course, for Paris Saint-Germain. Chris, what are your favourite memories of the Frenchman?
Well, I'll be more optimistic with this one. Yohan Cabaye, the first memory that comes to mind is that free kick against Man United, smacking off the bar, everyone in the stadium going mental. A Rolls Royce of a player on his day, and he also had that lovely bit of needle where he would kick somebody and he'd get stuck right in. I like to think of the good times with Yohan Cabaye, a bit like going out with a beautiful woman who breaks your heart. You remember the good days where you had long walks on the beach, etc., etc. I don't like to remember the bad bit when he wouldn't play for us and everything else. But I think as a player in general, I think our memories of him should be good. He was a neat and tidy footballer. He was capable of something special. He had a great partnership with Tiote, they could get stuck in when they needed to. At one point, they were arguably 2 of the best midfield pairings in the league at one point. I remember when we had Barr scoring and them 2 there, people were saying, God, how did Newcastle get these players for 4 million, 5 million? So in terms of Cabaye, great memories. And I think arguably leaving Newcastle was his biggest mistake because I think his career tailed off after that. So.
Lee, Yohan Cabaye scored some fantastic goals for Newcastle. Do you have any favourites?
Old Trafford.
Yeah.
Old Trafford in that Brazilian kit. It was just one of the best moments for a travelling support in probably a generation. I mean, it was so long since we'd won at Old Trafford. It was just everything about that day, the Brazil kit, the goal, the fact that we won at Old Trafford for the first time in however many years. That by a million miles. That by a million miles. Just coming on to what Chris said about it being Cabaye's biggest mistake leaving Newcastle when he did. I was surprised to read that Cabaye actually played more times for Palace than he did Newcastle.
He did, yeah.
Interesting.
That really surprised me. And as he said, though, his career did tail off because after that he spent some time in the Middle East before coming back to France. And I would look back on Cabaye's career as one of unfulfilled potential. The move to Paris Saint-Germain was a step too far.
Yeah.
In my opinion, he needed to spend a little bit more time developing as a player. But I would summarise his career as unfulfilled. He could have been so much more than he actually was. My wife loved him. She thought he was a handsome bastard. As did Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah, the dream bar, as he was commonly known as. But yeah, I mean, when we had Cabaye, we also had obviously Debussy. We brought in Sissoko and what have you. And one of my better memories of that era was my son's first game was French Day against Southampton in 2013, I think it was.
Was that 4-2 the result in that day?
It was, yeah, when Cisse hit that thunder bastard.
Yeah.
Yeah, spread that screen.
Yeah, we had the girls in the French can skirts going around the pitch, shooting French flags into the ground and what have you. And that was my son's first game. It was, and I think he thought it was going to be like that every week.
You've ruined
it. He's a season ticket holder now.
Too soon.
He's a season ticket holder now. He knows fine well it's very different to that on a weekly basis.
Craig, where does Yohan Cabaye rank amongst other great central midfielders we've had, such as Rob Lee, etc.?
You know, it's a really good question. I've been thinking about this before we came on here today, and you know, really good point that Lee makes. You know, he was only with us for a short period of time, but I think one of the things that I've sort of reflected on was that we sort of think of him and obviously Cheick, obviously, you know, for obviously much sadder reasons, but we reflect on them as being probably two of our best centre midfielders of the last 15, 20 years. But I think the reason is because that season where we finished fifth and went on that amazing run and we're in Champions League contention right until the last day of the season, it just stands out like a beacon of everything the Mike Ashley reign hasn't been. Most seasons it's been relegation battles. We've either stayed up by the skin of our teeth, we've got relegated, or we've been, you know, back in the Championship fighting our way back to the Premier League. And I think obviously we all cling on to that season where we did go on this amazing run. I mean, some of the results that season in particular were just, you know, phenomenal. Obviously, everybody remembers the Chelsea game for the Cisse brace, but he was right at the very heart of that. And, you know, as Chris said, the sort of the tandem, the partnership he built with Cheick, that sort of beautiful blend of creator and destroyer, if you like, it just sort of fitted really, really well with the rest of the squad. And yeah, I think he was right up there. That season, he was right up there as one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. I think in terms of personal memories, I think the lads have covered probably the two standout ones, particularly the Brazil kit one. I was actually in a pub in Didsbury Village in Greater Manchester watching that game, and let's just say I wasn't hiding what team I was supporting. It was like you could hear a pin drop, and all of a sudden I realised I just made a massive show of myself, and the pub was stormy quiet. It was like going into a Western or something. But I think my personal memory, didn't actually score in this game, I don't think, but on the Bruges trip away, we drew 2-2, and the stadium was about, we thought it was only like a mile out of town. It felt like about 3 miles out of town, but we drew 2-2, walking back into town, and it was just jubilant on the way back in. We'd had a great time, full of Belgian ale, and just singing the Don't Sell Cabaye song all the way back into Bruges City Centre. It was just a happy memory of mine, you know. Didn't win the game, he didn't even score, but yeah, real quality operator. And I think, just lastly, I think he's not been replaced, and I think that's ultimately why we still think of him so fondly. Is if you look at the level of midfielder we have now compared to what we had when him and Tiote were around, it's night and day.
I'll tell you what's interesting there, Craig, you're talking about he's not been replaced. You're totally right. Shelby's never got anywhere near him, in my opinion. When we signed Shelby, that was the excitement, wasn't it? We all thought he was going to be that player. If you look at the current players that we have, I know it's a bit hyperbolic to say it, but Matty has certain similarities to Cabaye, the way he's kind of on the ball and stuff like that. It's a long way to go for him, but a good coach would develop Matty to become that player, and that's obviously another problem that we have at the club, isn't it? So.
I'd say that my favourite Yohan Cabaye moment was the free kick at home. I can remember the date. It was the 4th of January 2012. It was only my first full season of having a season ticket, so I remember it very well. I remember it as being a horrible night. The rain was beating down, the wind was howling, and obviously Dembaba had put us ahead in the first half with a great flick over and into the net, and then Yohan Cabaye's free kick, unbelievable. That whole season as a whole, 11-12, was probably my standout season watching Newcastle, because that's probably the best I've ever known at Newcastle, which is a bit depressing, considering I'm sure you lads will have seen some better memories. I don't know. Do you have anything else to contribute on the matter, Chris?
No, I mean, I think we've kind of said it all. I mean, the only bad thing, I think Rafa said this best, where we're not a stepping stone club, and the problem was with players like Cabaye, we did become that for those players. They came out of nowhere, from I think it was Lille for $4.5 million, and nobody knew about them. We kind of stole a march, and credit to Graham Carr for these kind of players that he pulled out of the bag. But they did see us as a stepping stone, and they invariably became too big for us, didn't they? And that's why they wanted to move so much. So,
just finally on Yohan Cabaye, if he had stayed a bit longer and progressed a bit more time at Newcastle, how do you think his career would have gone?
Much as I would have loved him to stay, Yohan Cabaye, had he stayed, would have entered a period where we were really, really struggling. I think he left us in 2015, and we got
14,
relegated.
I think it was.
2014, 2015, and we got relegated the season after. Now, we could turn around and say that maybe had he stayed, we would have had a better opportunity to avoid relegation under McLaren. But on the flip side, he could have turned around and said, had he been part of that squad, he might have suffered as a result. I'd like to think that he would have kept us up, and he would have gone and exceeded and got more than the 48 caps that he did for France. But it's a difficult one because of the point at which he left. He left at quite a big juncture in the last 10 years for Newcastle United. But I'd like to think he would have gone on and kept us up and gone on to achieve 100 caps, win the World Cup as captain, lift the Champions League with Newcastle United. Sorry. Let me just grab a drink a sec.
Maybe more that drink.
One there, didn't there?
Speaking of France, the World Cup and all the like, our next topic is the divide between club football and international football. I myself take great interest in Newcastle and England, and I'm very much looking forward to the Euros this summer. So, Craig, what are your thoughts on international football?
I always think this is a really interesting question, this. And for me, I think it's probably changed over the course of my life, to be honest. So I think one of my earliest memories is Euro 96, having the cassette of 3 lines, Badil and Skinner. I can't really remember much of the games, but I just remember having this cassette, and I think I played it till it broke, because it was just, that whole summer, the tournament was in England. There was obviously an amazing feeling in the country, and obviously we had that sort of blast of nostalgia during lockdown last year, didn't we, when the games were back on telly and they were doing reruns of the Holland game and the Spain game, and obviously the sort of the nightmare of the Germany game, where obviously Gaza memorably came so close. But I think for me it's changed over the years. I think the rise of the Premier League has obviously taken on just a life of its own, really, and I think particularly now, I think there's a lot bigger focus on club football. I think club football is by far and away the dominant force in out of the two. I think for me, internationals, particularly during the season when it's meaningless friendlies, and even a lot of qualifiers when you're England and you've got the sort of the players and the resources we have, a lot of the qualifiers are just meaningless because we just tend to roll, the smaller nations over. It comes and breaks up the rhythm of the league season. And for me, I know amongst my friends that there's that sort of feeling of, it's 2 weeks that we'd rather we'll play club football. Could we not just cluster all the internationals either at the start or the end of the season? I think from a Newcastle perspective, obviously the sort of the scarcity, and obviously I'm speaking from an England point of view, but there's obviously been a scarcity of Newcastle representation in England squads. I mean, I sort of was looking up before the show. We've only had 5 Newcastle players represent us in the last 15 odd years, and the last of those was Andros Townsend, who was only at the club for 6 months. So you can sort of get a bit of a feeling for why potentially Newcastle fans aren't, are we keen on sort of following England? But I mean, for me, if it's a sort of a discussion between would you rather see Newcastle win an FA Cup or England win the World Cup, it's a Newcastle FA Cup all day for me.
So, with that being said, though, obviously you mentioned friendlies there, and you mentioned pointless games where people don't really take much interest. The Nations League, of course, was introduced a couple of years ago, which I actually think was quite a good idea. It sort of got rid of pointless friendlies and actually made them competitive and had a bit of an end goal at the end of it. So, Lee, what do you make of that?
I would disagree, to be honest with you, Daniel. That Nations League was a good idea. I might be in a minority here, but I still don't understand how the Nations League works. I think Harry Kane actually came out and said that he doesn't understand how the Nations League qualifiers work mid-tournament. Now, if you've got Harry Kane saying he doesn't understand it, how are any supporters going to get invested in it? I think the Nations League is basically a lot of glorified friendlies. I really do. So they've tried to replace meaningless friendlies with friendlies that are just a little bit less meaningless because they have something at the end of it. As I said, the Nations League for me, it's not been a success. I think there's very little interest in it. On the whole England subject, I used to travel quite regularly in the late 80s and early 90s with England. But I think not just England, but international football has been devalued to within an inch of its life for commercial purposes. It has, with friendlies, as I say, littered throughout the season, to the point where, Craig, as you said, fans are now looking at internationals as a hindrance. Back in the day when I was a young lad, we used to have the Home Nations tournament where you play Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and what have you. And that really meant something. Everybody looked forward to that because there was a little bit about it, sort of thing. But these games against the likes of San Marino and what have you, and caps are just distributed. Caps are distributed like there's like sweets. They are. Players used to have to earn an England cap. Some of the players that get England caps now, I mean, we've had players get caps for England who've never played for the club side. That's just farcical for me. It's an absolute farce that you can get an England cap having never played for the first team with your club side. So no, the National League for me hasn't been a success. I still haven't got a clue how it works. I'll give Harry Kane a ring at some point and see if he's figured it out.
I think I took a long time to try and work it out, and I did understand it eventually. I think the reason I liked it because it gave you games such as when we beat Spain 3-2 and when we beat Croatia 2-1 after the World Cup of 2018, and I really enjoyed those games. But
that Spain games have the same sort of meaning for you, though, when you watched it as a World Cup qualifier?
Not as much as, say, an actual World Cup or a European Championship, but certainly more than a qualifier, I think, just because the stadium was full and you could tell the Spaniards were really up for it. And I think what really showed is that instead of friendlies where there's a lot of squad rotation, teams tend to play their strongest squads in these games, which I thought give it some value. Chris, I don't know, do you have any thoughts on this?
To be honest, I'm kind of in the same camp as Lee. I think that international football has sold its soul for the pound, the dollar. I don't see the same passion as I saw back in Euro 96. I remember watching England versus Scotland. My dad's a Glaswegian, and that didn't go down very well, but the passion that was there, the fans, the players, the coaches, everything, I don't see that in modern day international football. I see it as more of a nuisance for the players they'd rather be going to Juventus or Real Madrid in the Champions League. That they're not really bothered about playing Azerbaijan at Wembley in front of 80,000, back when we could do that. It's just, for me, it doesn't have the same meaning, not just for the fans, but I think the players too. And in terms of the Newcastle element, I've got a bit of a problem with this because, I mean, recently, yes, you can't justify anyone except Wilson possibly getting in the England squad. But even when we were doing well with Rafa and Lascelles, and Shelby in particular, were doing very well. Southgate doesn't seem to want to have anything to do with what you would call mid-table sides. I think he only picked Jack Grealish out of pressure, from the media, really, because he was playing so well. he couldn't ignore him, and now he can't get rid of him because he is such a good player. There's just still too much of a top six bias for me with England as well. So I lose interest massively as a fan because of that.
You mentioned Jack Grealish there, and of course him, the likes of Phil Foden, James Maddison, etc., are promising young talents for England. So, Craig, how well do you see England doing at the Euros this year?
I actually think if we had a potentially more adventurous manager, I think we could go really close. I know, obviously, Gareth Southgate did a great job at the World Cup. You can't say he didn't. He took a squad that was, I think overperformed. I think he made it more than the sum of its parts. Everybody was going on around the three at the back, but I think ultimately we played two good sides in that tournament, and we got beat 3 times. I think it was. We got beat off Belgium in the group stage. Admittedly, I think we rested a few players. We then, came up against Croatia. I thought they were much the better side by the end of that game, and then we got beat off Belgium, I think, in the 3rd place game. So, he took us as far as we could go, but I think, we were a little bit flattered by that run. I think we got a favourable draw. Just coming back to what you were saying around the players we have at our disposal, Daniel, I think we've got some cracking young talent. I mean, Foden just looks to the manner born a top player, doesn't he? I'm a big fan of Maddison, Grealish as well. I think Grealish is a difficult one to like, with the amount of times he gets fouled. But, to be fair to him, he does dribble really well with the football and invite those type of challenges. So, you throw into the mix the more established lot of, Kane, Sterling. I mean, calling Marcus Rashford established, but he feels like he's been around forever as well. We've got the attacking potential to really go and sort of give this tournament a hit. But when you see recent games where, did we play 3 right backs in one game, or we played 7 defensive players on the pitch in a 3-5-2, and you're thinking, we've got all of this talent. It would be absolutely criminal to go out in a formation like that against, I don't get who it's against. The tournament by and large could be in this country in the summer. We're never going to have a better chance of winning the tournament for me. So I would like to think we do really well. I'd certainly like to think we'd be having a good run at the semis again. And hopefully Gareth will take the handbrake off and we could even sneak a finals place. Imagine what that would be like, lads. With the pubs open, the place will be absolutely bouncing, wouldn't it?
Would you say the talent that we've got is comparable to for example, the England Euro?
Don't use the term.
So if you look at Euro 2004, when we had Gerrard, we had Lampard, we had Beckham, we had Rooney and his pomp and what's have you, I put England's success at major tournaments a lot of it down to mentality. I really do. I think we've had a number of these so-called golden generations. And let's be fair, we call it the generation we've got at the minute could potentially be one of those with your Maddisons and your Grealishes and what have you. I think it's a mentality thing. You often hear of the German winning mentality and what have you, but I think it plays more of a part than people actually give it credit for. Coming back to this generation, do you think we have talent comparable to the French? Because I look at the French and I can't see past that for 2020 or 2021, whatever it is.
I think it's interesting because I think one of the big things a lot of these players have got, they're getting coached by some world-class managers, aren't they? And that helps develop. I mean, Phil Foden in particular, everyone was saying, why is he not going on low? And, Newcastle, take him on low at Newcastle or West Ham or something like that. We would have ruined him. But you look at him, and Pep Guardiola saw something in that player and thought, no, I'm going to coach you a little bit more and get you to that level a lot quicker. And you look at him now and you think, David Silva's gone and they're not missing him because the kid's such a good player. But I think one thing, Lee, that these guys have, maybe that Gerrard, and I love that generation, what a bunch of players. But I think this generation, they seem to have a bit more flexibility to move into different positions and play in different positions, whereas that generation, the big argument was always Scholes on the left. Why is he not in the middle? Gerrard, there had to be centre midfielders. And every time you played them, they all kind of jumped together in the middle. Whereas you see the likes of Foden and Maddison and Grealish that can go and play as a kind of a deep lying midfielder that can go and play as a number 10 and go out wide. So I think they've got a lot more flexibility in their game than maybe that golden generation had. So it's exciting what they could do. It's all.
I think on that point as well, the current cut of players have got England to 4th in the world rankings. Now, of course, the world rankings are a little bit, you can say about them what you will, but we haven't been that high in the world rankings for a good number of years now. So I think it's a testament to the players that we currently have that we are in the position that we're currently in. You mentioned France there. France certainly have a fantastic group of young players, just like us. I think Belgium, who are currently top of the world rankings, are starting to come maybe past their peak, because a lot of their players are starting to age a little bit. Whether they'll be able to go for another couple of tournaments and still be big contenders, I'm not really sure. I don't know. Craig, do you have any thoughts on how Belgium might do?
Yeah, I mean, you only got to look at the form of Lukaku for Inter Milan. You know, he's absolutely tearing the place up in Serie A. And, you know, I'm happy to see it for him, because I think he got a bit of a raw deal at Manchester United, to be fair. I think he was cast out. You know, his face didn't fit under Mourinho ultimately. And I think he paid the price for it. But, you know, you only have to look at his goals record. Every club he's been at, he's scored goals. And it's no different at international level. And I mean, how could he not score with, you know, getting fed balls from the likes of Kevin De Bruyne? You know, Yuri Tielemans, you know, they've got some wonderful players, Belgium. I do wonder if that experience of the World Cup, where they got to the semi-finals against France, it might help them just get over the hump in the Euros. You know, Martinez, I thought he was very fortunate to get that job at the time, but he's actually done a very good job, admittedly, with a very richly talented bunch of players. But yeah, I think for me, I would agree with Lee. I still think France are the favourites. You know, key reason being Mbappe, which we'll obviously come on to in a second. I think Belgium are in that sort of next rung. Spain is sort of having a mini revival as well. And I'd probably put us in there as well. Maybe a little bit optimistic saying that, but I think we're just below that sort of top favourites group.
You mentioned Mbappe there, of course, Craig, and that brings us on to our final topic of the night, which concerns the rising stars of world football of Erling Haaland and Kylian Mbappe. Chris, do you think they will emulate Ronaldo and Messi, as many people have tipped them to do, and reach the heights that they reached?
Well, I mean, firstly, we've got to say how lucky are we as football fans to be watching the game in an era with these two, you know, freaks, to be quite honest with you, know, taking the game to the next level every single week like they do with Messi and Ronaldo has been phenomenal. But we've always been asking the question, you know, as fans, as pundits, players, ex-players, who's next, you know, because this can't go on forever. These two amazing footballing gods can't keep doing what they're doing every season. And, you know, there's been a few different pretenders to the throne. I mean, obviously, Neymar at one point was the man on everybody's lips. He's kind of started to get niggly injuries now. So you look at those two, and, you know, in terms of the goals that they scored, I mean, the Champions League goals were in the press quite recently that, you know, they've got 28 between them, and Messi and Ronaldo only have 15. So all of a sudden, the Zimmer frames are out for Messi and Ronaldo, and the lads are coming in, you know. But, you know, from a career goal point of view, Messi and Ronaldo's careers were very different. You know, Haaland and Mbappe were strikers, you know, the goal scorers. Everything goes to them. When Messi and Ronaldo were the same age, I think Ronaldo only had 27 goals at 21 years old, but he was a winger. You know, it wasn't until the season after he really kicked into being the Ronaldo that everybody knows now. Messi had 42 goals, but he was playing second fiddle to Ronaldinho for quite a bit. So, you know, Mbappe and Haaland, I think Haaland's got 90 goals and Mbappe's got 141, which is phenomenal. But the key point is consistency. You know, can these guys do this season after season after season and stay injury free? Because that is something that Messi and Ronaldo have done for a long time.
I think on the topic of being injury free, that's such a vital thing. We mentioned before this was broadcast of the original Ronaldo, who scored a phenomenal amount of goals before he picked up a debilitating knee injury. Lee, do you think he could have potentially challenged to be one of the greatest of all time if that hadn't have happened to him?
Personally, no, because I don't think the original Ronaldo, if you want to call him that, I don't think he was a natural athlete. I think you look at the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo, and I think he's got the work ethic and the athleticism that's helped him to sort of have the career he's had over 15 to 20 years, whatever it is, without wanting to be disrespectful to the original Ronaldo. If you see him now, I think what you see is somebody who wasn't a natural athlete and possibly had to work on his fitness, probably more than. So, don't get me wrong, I saw Ronaldo in the World Cup in '98, and the man was a freak of nature. Had he not had the incident he had before the final, I still maintain France wouldn't have run away with a 3-0 win, and Brazil might have turned them over. But I don't think Ronaldo, had he had the career or an injury-free career, would have been anywhere near the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi. When you look at the statistics between them, I mean, Ronaldo's got 765 goals and 224 assists in 1,048 appearances with a goal ratio of 0.73 per game. Messi's got 726 goals and 304 assists in 903 games. So he's averaging more than a goal or an assist per game. He's averaging 0.8 goals per game throughout his career. And they've done it over a period of 15, 16 years. I think you said, Chris, that we were fortunate. I think we're blessed as football fans to have experienced those two players coming along at the same time in their pomp. And let's be honest, they've bounced off each other. They've had their own personal competition going on for 10 years. I saw Maradona in the '86 World Cup, and he was head and shoulders above anybody else in the world. He didn't have any competition for the world's best player. These two have been having their own personal sort of goal of the season competition and golden boot competition for 10 years, and it's just been a joy. It's been an absolute joy. So I would say that Haaland and Mbappe could be seen as the new Lionel and Cristiano. Maybe in a 5, 6, 7, 8 years' time. Let's see where they are then.
Craig, do you think they'll get to that stage? As obviously Lee's mentioning of the stats there for Ronaldo and Messi are unbelievable. Do you think that Mbappe and Haaland can get anywhere near those sort of stats in their careers? Of course, they're both only young at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris used the word freak, and I think that's absolutely spot on. I mean, we've got to be careful when we look to anoint players the next Ronaldo, the next Messi. You know, it becomes a sort of a poison chalice, if you like. I think, you know, Lee's rattled off some of the numbers there. They are literally mind blowing. I mean, Ronaldo hit 50 goals a season for 6 seasons in a row. Now, put that in perspective. That's 300 goals in 6 seasons. Most strikers, top flight, top level elite strikers would snap your hand off for a career of 300 goals. That's how good these guys are. Messi the same, hit 73 and 60 in consecutive seasons. Absolutely outrageous numbers. 73 goals in a season. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. Haaland and Mbappe, they're massively exciting. Haaland in particular, I love them both, don't get me wrong, but I think Haaland is, really, really special. I think it looks to me, he has that look in his eye. He lives for goals. He reminds me of Shearer back when he was in his pomp, that sort of mid-90s. He just, he's got all types of finish. He can sledgehammer it. He can dink. He can, pass it into the corner, long range, short range, headers. He's got strength, pace. I honestly think he could be anything. He really could be. And, he's a goal a game for Dortmund at the moment. It'll be interesting. I think one thing to say about them both is just where they're at in their careers at the moment. You've obviously got Mbappe, a World Cup winner. He's been to a Champions League final. He's sort of in that Paris Saint-Germain team. They're having a bit of a battle in the league this year, but, ultimately they should win that. And they're a dominant force in Ligue 1. Haaland, he's in that sort of Dortmund team, bright young things, but ultimately buy and dominate that league. Where will be their next move? Will it be Real Madrid and Barcelona? But they both got financial sort of challenges. Do players still see them as the top two? Will we see them come to the Premier League? I'd love to see them tested, in the Premier League. That would be brilliant to have at least one of those two come over to the Premier League. Ultimately, there's only probably 2 or 3 clubs in the league who could afford them. But how blessed would we be to see them, regularly on Match of the Day, live on Sky? But ultimately, just lastly, Messi out of contract at the end of the season. May not be a popular opinion, but I would love to see him come to Man City. I think just to see him in the Premier League, it's, that old cliche, could he do it on a wet Tuesday night in Stoke, which is absolute bollocks. But ultimately, it would be great to see him come to the Premier League. How would he fare in that different surrounds? Because we've seen Ronaldo do it. He's done it in England, Italy, and Spain. He's a title winner in all 3 of those. It just would be nice to see Messi come and try and take over the Premier League as well.
Just one last stat. I think Sergio Aguero recently equalled Alan Shearer's record for hat-tricks in the Premier League, something like 12 or something along those lines. Messi has got 54 hat-tricks. And Cristiano Ronaldo has got 56 hat-tricks.
Insane. Absolutely insane.
It's incredible. It's interestingly, just on that point you mentioned about the old Ronaldo, R9 as he's often known, I think the big thing he missed that these two have in spades is mentality. He loved the nightlife and he loved to boogie, as the song goes, doesn't he? That was his problem. He was more interested he's more interested off the pitch than he was on the pitch half the time, even though he was just brilliant. And I think, the sacrifices certainly Cristiano, has made. You see it, he doesn't drink, doesn't do anything, he's constantly working out. Messi, I'm sure, the same as well. That's what Haaland and Mbappe have got to strive for. They can't get sidetracked with ladies and drink and all that stuff. And, like Ronaldo did, they'll end up the same.
I agree with all your points on those players. Yeah, I think you make some great points, Lee. Thank you very much for being stat man tonight. Some absolutely fantastic numbers you've rattled off there. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for tonight. Thank you all very much for joining me. Once again, if you would like to be part of True Faith, contribute, do things like this, head to @TFNUFC on Twitter and get in touch. All that remains for me to say is thank you all very much for watching at home. Stay safe. Hopefully, we'll be out of lockdown quite soon, thanks to Boris's announcement. And goodbye.